It was the first time that I saw death at my doorstep. He couldn't even wave goodbye as I saw my mother depart towards the heavens. Since we were kids, we couldn't help plan the funeral, the arrangement, or the dinner that came after. And funeral etiquette says that we were supposed to wear black and look depressed, like a sick joke or something. We all jammed in a funeral procession up the long and winding street towards the Baptist church that my mother just recently passed by, now calls home. The service was hot, long, and dreadful, even from my small and minuscule frame and my minimal years on this earth. This is the first time that I experienced loss, but it wasn't the last. Society says that men are supposed to be stoic in the company of death, but I felt death should evoke an emotional response regardless of gender. Therefore, at my grandmother's funeral, my masculinity positively embraced the tears that ran down my face and the flood that flooded my heart. Summer of my 7th grade. We had moved into a suburban neighborhood. I've been growing up in rural Madison, Georgia my entire life. This was the first time that I experienced moving in an urban landscape. So while there, my brothers and I befriended some neighborhood boy, swag of city boy who grew up in the country. They all had all kinds of games, such as the new PS2, BB guns, a Game Boy Color, and even a bike. They were so cool. They mentioned how their father bought all that stuff for them. Not that a father should buy his children's love and affection. It's just that growing up without a father, I wish that I had one who could buy me things. So one evening, the boys, my brothers, and I got into a little argument over who had won a baseball game, which led to a full-on melee right in front of our doorstep. It was my first fist fight outside of the little skirmishes that my little brothers and I had growing up. So I was so upset that after it was over that I proceeded to cry because I knew that this would be an effective end of any male friendship for the foreseeable future. Where's the father when you need one? Fall of 8th grade. I finally had come to terms that I was gay. For countless years before, I skirted around this issue, refusing to come to terms with reality. I felt ashamed of my identity because kids name called me over time, but I realized that those names were unfair, for they assigned a stereotypical portrayal of homosexuality that unjustly made being feminine a negative attribute. I wouldn't dare come out because I didn't know how my peers would accept such a thing. I was too cool to be ostracized. I mean, come on, have you seen his face? And I knew what happened to all the other gay boys on the football team and in PE class. They were beat up and bullied, and I didn't want to be like those kids. I always knew that I was gay since I was a smaller boy in Catholic elementary school. When I would switch and the nuns would pull me over and tell me, you couldn't do that, otherwise you're going to go to hell, son. But it was fun, though, watching all the pretty ladies move their bodies so elegantly back and forth, whereas men had to stiffen up and move like robots. I always thought it was unfair and unjust for folks to tell me how best to describe my sexuality. But simultaneously, when I was exploring my sexual identity, I explored my competitive drive. I always wanted to be accepted in the company of other men, so to cope, I strove to get all A's and become involved in school, so that I could get high and respected male attention in the form of teachers, coaches, peers, to fill the void of dad. Some of these men played a prominent role in shaping the man that I would become later in life. In particular, my 8th grade social studies teacher, Mr. Williams, who taught me the valuable lesson that you always fight for what you believe in. I was fixated. Fall of junior year of high school. In high school, when my twin brother and I were 17, and my little twin brother's 15, my mom succumbed to stroke. I was heartbroken to find that my matriarch was no longer the mother and father of my life, but my little brothers and I had to bear the responsibilities of life head on. We were fortunate that our lives were not disrupted in the sense that we had to leave home and live with other relatives, or be like many of the unfortunate souls within foster care. Being from suburbanites, we could easily walk back and forth to school if need be, go to the Publix off of Wesley Chapel, or a Quick Trip when we needed slushies to refuel ourselves in between class. With my mom absent, I constructed a man of the house identity on the fly. There was no learning curve, no second chance, no manual to read. Every action and inaction had real-world consequences. Therefore, I needed to assume this leadership role regardless of my own personal capabilities. My book-laden paradise of school was no longer school, was no longer paradise, and it was no longer home. The events I told to you today of competition, loss, despair, sexuality, and power are events that I've experienced without a father present. I created this anthology to paint the picture that life can be parts fear, parts exploration, or even parts amusement. Yet, it is up to the person to define this reality. Although I used to shop in the masculinity store of life, buying plastic masks to cover what's underneath, over time I've taken on parts of my mask pertaining to my sexuality, and I'm currently taking on parts of my mask as it regards to my public emotions. I've molded a new existence contingent on my own personal self-discovery and the social expectations that I decided to paint atop this creation. Thank you.
I was a teenager when I learned the fallacies and misconceptions about what makes a man a man. These messages came from several sources. I remember being in my room rapping along to Jay-Z. Jay-Z says, I thug him, fuck him, love him, leave him, because I don't fucking need him. I even remember being at school and reading Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. The main character, Brutus, is portrayed as a stoic. Brutus was a man who acted based on his rational thought rather than his emotions. This rational thought led him to participate in a plot to kill his best friend, a man that he loved, Julius Caesar. I admire Brutus's rationality, and I admire Jay-Z's cold-heartedness. These particular influences and several others all pointed to the same narrative for me as an adolescent. Be a man. Don't act on your emotions. Be tough. Emotions will make you weak. Have sex with a lot of girls. Don't care about their feelings. Ultimately, don't have any feelings of your own. So for a long time, I existed in this very, quote-unquote, rational place. And this is something, admittedly, that I do still battle today. As a teenager, I never provided time for my exploration, for the exploration of my emotional needs. I also ignored how my callous actions affected, or often wholly ignored, the emotional needs of others. As a now 24-year-old man, going through this new enlightenment, maturation, and mission for wholeness, there are a few things that I wish I would have known as a young, impressionable teenager, when all of these damaging messages were coming in. I wish at 13 or 14, I would have known that being in touch with my emotions could have prevented myself from hurting a lot of women. As a younger man, I would use women for my own sexual needs, without even a thought to the emotional scars I would leave them with as I kicked them out shortly after sex. Or the scars I would leave them with as I gathered my belongings and left in the middle of the night. At 13 or 14, I wish I would have known that if a woman was so unfortunate enough to hold my interest for longer than a night, that I would end up causing emotional havoc in those relationships as well. There were beautiful, smart, forgiving women who showed me an immense amount of physical and emotional love. But I possessed neither the desire nor the capacity to reciprocate that love. I did not know love. I would ignore phone calls and texts for days, or withdraw all intimacy and affection from the relationship, essentially reducing our relationship to sex. And when she would express how I hurt her, how my actions actions were causing her a deep, disappointing pain, when she would tell me how I was emotionally abusing her, I'd simply say, you shouldn't take things so personally. Just get over it. I wish I would have known how those actions would lead to a now present apprehension, to get romantically close to anyone again, because I know the cold-hearted pain I am capable of inflicting upon others. I want to learn how to love women better. I wish at 13 or 14 that I would have known how suppressing my emotions would affect my friendships with other men. I wish I would have known that it would cause me to have very few emotionally deep, meaningful connections with the men in my life. Sure, we could talk about pussy, basketball, music, video games, but I wish I knew that I wouldn't feel comfortable expressing love, disappointment, admiration, and appreciation to the men that I do hold dear to my heart. I wish at 13 or 14 I would have known that I wouldn't tell a good friend of mine that I loved him until I was crying looking at him in his casket. I wish I would have known how to express my love for him and tell him how his actions were putting himself in danger, and that I couldn't bear to see him hurt himself or ultimately be murdered. I wish I would have known that my active love may have saved his life. I wish at 13 or 14 I would have known that these same messages would be told to other men in my life, and that I could have changed many lives by actively loving those men that were around me. I want to learn how to love men better. At 13 or 14, I wish I knew that suppressing my own emotions would lead me to not really know and love myself, or give myself the freedom to express the emotions that are very much a part of me. That by ignoring and disvaluing this whole emotional portion of my being, that it will cause a lot of self-criticalness and self-hate. I wish I would have known that I wouldn't be able to wholly appreciate my mistakes, my failures, my successes, my sadness, my joy, because I didn't understand who I really was. That I truly would learn to be comfortable with who I am because I process my life through this rational lens, rather than a lens of compassion and understanding. I wish I would have known that suppressing my emotions would ultimately make me less human, less authentic. I want to learn how to love myself better. Today I stand here with this knowledge of my past and this mission to learn how to love women, men, and myself better. I am working to value my emotions and the emotions that others possess as well. I think having emotions is what makes people people. And there are consequences and repercussions for not valuing my own emotions or the emotions of others. As a man, I want to feel. I need to feel. As a man, I want to love, and I need to love. As a man, I want to be whole.
Before I begin, I want to tell you what this is not. This is not a sob story. This is not an attempt to add to anyone's guilt. I don't want affirmation of my pain. I don't want to think any of these lines are catchy. I just want someone to hear me out and listen intently. Because I no longer see myself as a victim, and I will no longer accept help or love in the form of sympathy. That may seem normal, or an attempt to seem unique, but that wouldn't surprise me because I've always been different. I was made aware that I was different when I was told that I dance a little too much or I feel my emotions a little too deeply. My overwhelming joy or sadness erased and stomped out with phrases like, "Yo, stop acting like a sissy." This alone should have been the signal that life was going to be a constant struggle between who I am and who I am supposed to be. and I needed to be briefed on the rules of engagement immediately. I didn't know that the journey to self-love would be like a civil war of astral collisions between my soul and my ego, my image and my identity, all cocooned in my internal arena constructed of flesh, pain, illusion, and shame. You would think it was the Hunger Games, but now I stand here before you like a buffalo soldier sporting a medal of honor from a war I did not start. And I do not know whether I received it for my integrity or merely surviving, while for many others on a similar path, life was not as kind. According to statistics or social norms, I, as a gay black man, should be neither alive, educated, healthy, nor free. Yet I willingly stand before you now, all of those things, and most importantly, loved. In spite of the fact that I am a walking canvas for the ignorant to express their prejudice and bigotry that result in compounded oppression so intense that anger and violence seem like a viable life vest when I'm drowning in a sea of supposed to be's. As a black man, all the negative qualities associated with masculinity are put under a microscope, in addition to being criminalized because of my black body. As a black gay man, I am even further marginalized in both of those communities because my sexuality is portrayed as a deviant, weak, or potentially diseased. This leaves little room or opportunity for my truth, because it usually falls on ears that think I can somehow fracture my identity into tiny, little itty-bitty pieces and only address the things they are comfortable discussing. Black people who want to discuss the hypersexual images and ideas about black bodies, but only as they pertain to straight sex. Queer people who disregard issues of race or assume that their experience as a sexual minority somehow means that they're an expert on being a racial minority. Discussions mired in assumptions and microaggressions flying like bullets, threatening to create holes in the perceived identity in which I hold. In order to protect myself, I use everything thrown at me as material to construct my cocoon like a caterpillar. In order to protect me from more pain and ultimately to catalyze my own transformation. Walls made up of smart defensive quips and perpetual apathy that were indestructible from the outside. Layers made of expectations, questions, and statements such as, "Why do you talk so white? Put some bass in your voice. Have you ever stolen anything? Don't tell anyone you're gay, because you are just assisting in the constant emasculation of the black man. Trust me, I understand, because gay is the new black. I'm just not into black men, but it's a preference, I promise, I'm not racist. It may go away if you pray about it. For the time that I was encapsulated in the darkness around me, I tried to figure out how so many people could disregard my humanity or lack empathy. When I was younger, my mom always told me that the golden rule is that you treat others the way you want to be treated. But time and experience began to show me that there was more to that story. Some say that the platinum rule is that treat others the way they want to be treated. I personally follow the diamond rule, which is that regardless, people will treat you the way they are willing to treat themselves. So look, listen, and prepare yourself accordingly. That's when it clicked. No matter how hurtful or misguided the things others have said to me, maybe in the grand scheme of things, it had nothing to do with me specifically. It's not that I was contagious like an incurable disease. They feared that their immune system would not hold up against the unknown. Or they feared the consequences of accepting what they knew were true, but who was I to assume? For I would just be like those who made incorrect assumptions about me, so why was I accepting their misinformed hypotheses about my reality? That was a crack in my cocoon, and light began to shine it ever so slightly. It widened when I realized approval was nice, but not a necessity. More layers began to melt away slowly but surely when I noticed that people were very good at loving you conditionally. And the only unlimited source of unconditional love was inside of me. So I began to love every aspect of myself without exception. I love that the constricting feeling in my chest, and the tears that follow insults and disappointments are reminders that I am human, and that tears are both cleansing and temporary. I love the way I embrace my emotions in a way that make me feel alive and always in alignment with my true self. I love that my willingness to be vulnerable gives me freedom to pursue my dreams and tap into my creative powers. I love expressing my inner music with my body, whether it be in celebration or an escape from the trials of the day. I love how the trials and tribulations experienced in my life have taught me that above all other things, I am resilient. I love that my flesh is deep, varied, and enduring as that of the earth on which I stand, armed, strong, and versatile enough to hold masculinities, femininities, and the journey of my ancestors close. I am able to draw upon the power of my honest traditions, locks, resistance, and precision, afros, pyramids, and songs of nations, love without bounds, shackles without bonds, freedom, hope, and joy, unrelenting, blackness. I love how I learned to extract the lessons from failures that were inevitable. I love that I have accepted that my lack of perfection is the source of all within me that is beautiful and still growing. I love having the realization that I am a man because of the sex I was born into, but the only thing that defines me as a person is how true I am to myself and how much compassion I show others. I was able to stop looking for a ruler outside of me that I had been told had condemned me to hell. When I decided to look within, it was unbelievable because I had found what I thought was only for the colored girls who had considered suicide on the rainbow was enough. I found God in myself and I loved her fiercely. She told me that loving myself does not make me selfish, it makes me indestructible. And to first love yourself and all else will be given unto you. And that's when I completely emerged from my cocoon, standing on top, triumphantly ready to fly free, knowing that my past does not have to define my future. And even though the journey to self-love is a solo mission and I had to complete it for myself, there is a kaleidoscope of black, queer butterflies waiting for me to come home and join them in the sky. And to all my black, queer brothers and sisters I ignored because I did not know how to love myself, who needed support I did not yet know how to give. I love you, and anything I do is ultimately for us.
I'd stand over a lover, half smirk appraisingly at the soft beauty, a hand cupping the half ring of teeth marks below the mute pink, the pursed brown or deep chocolate of an areola, and marvel at how small my life looked on the bed. Even beneath shrapnel-scarred eyelids, I can see through my sergeant's lies, can see there is violence in looking at a girl like that, and also violence in refusing to let myself be looked at. Flashback. After that deployment, I got a flashback. The docs say traumatic memories are tied to olfaction, which apparently means I get set off more by the way shit smells. Every time I get the scent of an Odell's Brewery IPA, I taste the inside of this one army girl's thighs, hear her say fuck me like she's a ghost talking to a ghost. I'd like to go home now. Flashback. After that deployment, I got a full-sleeve tattoo. Half the miasma of souls in Dante's Inferno, and half ballroom floors full of autumn girls trying to get my attention. How silence is a full disclosure of my secrets, like the blossoming blood of dead leaves. How, through the violence and the firefights, and my taking this duty on, and my taking of lives, I didn't become a man. I became a leaf in the midst of winter. Flung along footpaths, wearing death openly, my skin a mixture of bruise and burn, and it was only through weathering the cold in silence, like a first snowstorm that doesn't hit until the heart of winter, that I found within me an invincible summer. Flashback. 3 things are loved in my Marine Corps world: women, perfume, and prayer. These things cling and abide short moments like the frost we wipe from weapon muzzles clings in the cold Iraqi air. The way pre-dawn darkness grasps sand and minutes before the Adhan. The new Muazzin's got himself a serrated voice, A jagged voice, a broken bottle voice you can clutch like a K-bar. I want to clutch it like a K-bar, ground sharp, honed and lashed to Picatinny rails. My bayonet attachment to my service rifle. Bogram's a different town since shit went sideways at the Wyden's house, where I learned how fresh burnt flesh smells like roast beef. Infantrymen are now the law, and the law is a pack of rabid dogs hunting high-value targets, covering bearded brown faces with black bags like butterfly nets, skimming in the morning air. Present day. You angels, the paper ones I read in class with greater wingspans, who won the leader's approval, affection, or just forgiveness for being, slack-jawed and grinning like today's weather, like a combat status report, like a tenured track appointment. You can come in and see the turning, paintbrushes and machine guns in your hands. Lord, at this moment I ask one thing for myself, to learn to say goodbye to the desert. Just a miracle goodbye in the desert. Then I would be as this is. Our souls are as the souls of men are, or as a man is. And you can flee through my journey in the space between the pilgrim and what is someone's pilgrimage. I have sold out the whole. Sold out the soul, and patched the heel-singing juncture with scar tissue. I am the puncture of a man. Flesh made flesh, I am the homeless man I walked past, who said I sound like a pharmacy. Prescription bottles like miracles and maracas, rather like spare change in the wrong hands. Like a VA script. A governmental hieroglyphic that looks like a cup you can't fill, even if you were to be somebody's son. Oh, you didn't think I saw salvation that night? But you were right, I didn't believe. In this field, which, when in battle, changes channel subtly, subtitles. And in 1 minute we know his name. The man from the country of left to right, where letters are like birds in your hands. And I wonder if it's fatherhood, or if it's death, I should try and explain. You see, I should explain. 2 years after they shipped my body back, I came in that same way. In the middle of the night, with plastic hoses and tubes and IV bags full of red and light blue light pumping me back through gulf and ocean. Strapped into a life vest, a quick clot and masking tape life preserver that had been strolling dead down sandy beaches for 2.5 years. Then became a father. And now holding that little life was like putting a contact in a blind cataract, lensing joy-dead eyes and being able to see.
It was 1993, the summer of my 18th birthday. Not much unlike the 13 summers before that I had spent in that small town of Hartsville, South Carolina. I say not much, but there was one big difference. In just a few weeks, I will be leaving that small town for Atlanta to attend college and to pursue my dreams of becoming the Black Walt Disney. And I couldn't wait to start my new life. My friends and I arrived at the movie theater early that day to lock down the best seats. Menace to Society was the blockbuster hit of the summer, and we wanted to benefit from the cool points that would surely come from being amongst the first to see it. And it was everything we imagined it would be. Full of black male swag, hip-hop, drugs, girls, and lots of violence. But what I didn't expect, and what I couldn't imagine, was the anxiety that came along with it. In Menace, the main character, Kane, was a young man of 18 years, like me. Kane lost both of his parents at an early age, like me. Kane grew up in the projects, raised by his grandparents, like me. But unlike me, Kane had a near lifelong habit of making bad choices, seemingly inherited from his father before him. Kane was every stereotype of the black male degenerate: violent, criminal, reckless, and filled with apathy. But life was changing for Kane, and finally at the end of that summer he had an escape from the violence and trauma he had known all his life. He was leaving for Atlanta, just like me. But Kane didn't make it. He was gunned down in a drive-by shooting as he and his friends packed for his journey. Despite the fact that the circumstances surrounding Kane's life and his poor choices were a far cry from my own, I left the theater that day fearing that I too would never make it out of my situation. Though I didn't live the type of violence Cain was party to, life had also been traumatic for me. Growing up in poverty and subject to verbal and physical abuse at home, I was eager to escape that small town and start a new life. But despite my adversities, I had always been a good student. I was hardworking and focused, and many people from my church and school would share with me their high hopes for my future. But for some reason, the images and minutes rattled me. Suddenly, I was left with the impression that for me and people like me, there would be no escape. That somehow, simply being a black man was an inevitable death sentence. You see, both before and after the success of Minutes, there have been a slew of films about young black men struggling to survive in urban environments from the East to West Coast, and I loved them. I love films like Juice, Boys in the Hood, New Jersey Drive, Colors, South Central, New Jack City, and yes, Menace to Society. On one level, they echoed my reality. Their popularity resonated with the widespread popularity of a rising hip-hop culture of which I was very much a part. But these films also echoed the tragic view of black male youth that I had often heard espoused in popular statistics and reports. Things like my proximity to death or prison or the threat of becoming a teen father had become a growing shadow over my own developing identity. And as a young black man, the constant messaging of death and despair within black masculinity began to color the way I saw my potential. The idea that I could die before I ever had a chance to try suddenly began to weigh heavily on me. And I began to mark my manhood by the tragedies I avoided rather than the things I accomplished. 18, never been arrested. 20, never been shot. 23, no children. The idea that I was doomed loomed over me deep into my 20s. Was this really my reality, an unavoidable destiny? In anticipation of my demise, I grew stagnant. My dreams of becoming the Black Walt Disney seemed less like an objective and more like a far-off fantasy. Where I had once possessed an enviable tenacity and resilience, I became apathetic and disengaged. In fact, after my first year in college, I found myself on the verge of being kicked out of school as my GPA dropped from a 3.8 to a 1.9. I began to think all of my instructors were out to get me, and my friends saw only a shell of the outgoing person I had once been. But at my lowest, I knew that something was off. Even then, during that summer of my 18th birthday, when the seed of despair had been planted, I realized that my anxiety was unsubstantiated. My small South Carolina town didn't know the violence and dysfunction pictured in Minutes. Unlike Cain, I wasn't a violent person. I had never even been in a fight. And I didn't fit neatly within the narratives that were used to describe my peers as young black men. In fact, no one I knew did. But fear trumped knowledge. I knew I was nothing like Cain, but fear prevented me from acknowledging that. After a while, I began to understand more clearly that even when I could see myself in the images on the screen, that's all they were, images, not reality, certainly not my reality, and not my life. In one scene in Minutes, Cain's grandfather asked the wayward teen if he cared whether he lived or died. Cain replied, "I don't know." And by the time he realized his answer, it was too late. It took a while before I could think about that closing scene in Minutes and not see my own bullet-riddled body on the lawn. It took a while before I realized that the tragic images and stats that I heard about my black masculinity weren't a script for me to follow. It took a while before I realized that I had a choice in how I performed my identity. Unlike Cain, I knew that I cared to live, but what I needed to learn was that you have a choice in how you do that. That realization became empowering. It allowed me to see that my personhood, like any expression of identity, comes in many stripes. And it has freed me from the fear of the fraud and limiting depictions of black masculinity that continues to be imaged in popular media. It has given me a platform to use my work as an intervention in representations of black manhood. And it has empowered me to understand that the real menace to society is not the tragic young black man depicted in these films and stats and horror stories, but the one who is aware that he has the power, the capacity, and the responsibility to make his story his own. Thank you.